What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you again today on another fun podcast episode. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for giving us a listen. Thanks for giving us a subscribe or leaving comments or whatever you do. You do all the things. So thanks for doing it. Appreciate it. I today to bring on Patrick Sweet. He is running an incredible project. It's at engineeringandleadership.com. He's calling it the Engineering and Leadership Project. And he's teaching everything about becoming a leader in this space. Many times we hear that engineers don't make good leaders, and so we do talk about this and why anybody can make a good leader. Oftentimes it's just we need to slow down a little bit. So we have a fun conversation about leadership in general. Pat is awesome. He's worked in this industry for 13 plus years as a systems engineer, working on automation on a lot of cool stuff from trains to naval defense. And really smart guy, really fun guy to talk to. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation I have with him about everything dealing with engineering and leadership. So if you've ever had a desire to become a leader, or you had questions about becoming a leader, there's going to be some good stuff for you here. Many engineers, when they get into the industry, some people are really aggressive and want to jump into leadership really quickly. And so we do talk about that. And maybe it's probably a better idea to go slowly and to learn your skills first before you jump into management. But all of that stuff is kind of detailed in what we talk about. So anyway, fun episode with Pat. It's coming up right up after this. See you in a minute. All right, Patrick, thanks for jumping on the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. I appreciate you joining me today.
Likewise, super excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be great. So I always love to hear people's own journeys into civil engineering, how you got here, and figure out what you're doing. But maybe in your own words, it would be nice to hear how you found yourself. What was your journey into civil engineering? What was that like for you?
So I should pause here because I'm not actually a civil engineer.
Oh, I mean engineering. Let's back up. Let's get rid of civil. Let's go to engineer. How'd you get into engineering?
So I probably like most people, math and physics were my favorite subjects in high school. It seemed like a natural fit. My dad is a computer scientist, so kind of exposed to that world from the get-go. Had relatives who were engineers, and it seemed the natural choice. So went to engineering school, did electrical engineering here at the school Dalhousie University here in Halifax. And started my career in building and facilities design. So certainly rubbing shoulders with civil engineers and engineers of other disciplines. But eventually got into what's called systems engineering, which is a totally different discipline. And what systems engineers care about is the it's kind of like the level of engineering that has to happen in mega projects before the detailed design stuff can start. So my introduction to that was in the world of rail. I ended up being a chief engineer and product manager for a company designing driverless autonomous rail systems.
Wow.
Really, really cool stuff. The train would pull up to the station, doors open automatically, people get on, doors close automatically, and it drives itself to the next station. Really, really cool stuff. But as you could imagine, these are phenomenally complex systems, safety critical. You got to be very, very careful about, routing trains, automatic train control. So phenomenally complex. And it was through that experience that I got into systems engineering, thinking through, okay, this system as a whole, we can make it do anything. So what are the right things to have it do? What are this system's requirements? How are we going to make sure that at the end of the day, instead of just having a bunch of train parts, we have an integrated, working, safe train? So that's what systems engineering is all about. And then I took those skills into the defense industry and got into the world of shipbuilding. And the same fundamental problem. When you have the time and the money and the smarts, you can make a ship do anything, right? These are world-class, phenomenally complex, phenomenally advanced systems. The question gets to be more about, okay, what's the right thing to do? And then what's the smartest way to achieve those goals and allow the ship to execute the missions that it's going to go on. So very, very cool stuff.
You bring up a point that's been bouncing around in my head, and who sets those goals? Who sets those values? Who tells it when a train to stop and not to stop? You know, like
Yes.
who teaches it like values and ethics? Like I know that comes from the creators, but who sets those rules?
Yeah, it's really it's a great question, and um, over the course of generations of designing trains in the train building and the shipbuilding world, you're pretty lucky because there's a long history of both, right? So
Hmm.
there's a great deal of not just institutional knowledge within large organizations, but knowledge within the industry.
Got it.
So there are standards that get set that everyone knows about and everyone respects. But also there are kind of tools of the trade to understand things like, for example, the adhesion values between a steel rail and a steel wheel, and what happens when it's raining, right? And what happens
Wow.
when it's snowing, and there's all this uh, knowledge stored up that helps us understand how a train is going to behave in certain situations and what you need to do in order to keep it safe. And in the world of automatic train control, these systems are phenomenally safe.
Hmm.
And if you look at the history of the company that I worked for, um, uh, accidents that happen on systems like that, 99 times out of 100, maybe 999 times out of 1,000, it occurs when a person is in charge of the train as opposed to the automatic train control.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, sorry for that tangent. I just
No,
was
that's
we
great.
started
That's
talking about
great.
that. And I'm like, who's setting that up? So, Pat, why don't you tell us more about what you do today, um, and how that's going for you? So, what are we doing now?
What we're doing now, I just launched a company called the Engineering and Leadership Project. And the reason I launched this business is I recognize through my own experience as a product manager, a people manager, um, a project manager, that these skills are critical in terms of having an engineering team succeed. Having a really strong manager, a really strong leader to work with and work for uh, makes all the difference in the world in terms of the success of the work, in terms of work life balance, in terms of engagement. The problem, though, is that most engineers, when they get promoted into management or pushed into a leadership role, really aren't supported the way they need to be. If
Hmm.
they're really lucky, they get a half day seminar from HR on, here's leadership. And the
If
problem
that.
is that these are fundamentally different jobs. And if Joe is the best engineer on the team and Joe gets promoted to management, well, why is it that we expect Joe to be a good manager now? It's not
It's a good
really
question.
fair, and it doesn't make sense. We would never take a great manager who doesn't have an engineering background and say, "Well, you're a great manager. What? Let's put you in engineering."
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't make any sense. These are two fundamentally different jobs, and my mission is to equip engineers who, by the way, I think have the potential to be phenomenal managers and phenomenal leaders, and equip them with the tools, the skills, the mindset to thrive in that role. So it's not just someone being thrown in the deep end and being asked to swim. That's the whole mission of the project here.
There's almost a stigma out there that engineers don't make great managers. I've heard that many times, and I'm curious your thoughts around that. Why is that kind of the saying that you
Yeah,
hear in the industry?
I think there's an assumption
Hmm.
that a certain kind of person is best suited to be a leader or a manager. And you think of extroverted, life of the party, talk to
Yes.
anyone,
People
baby kissing
person.
politician type people. And the truth is your personality and your disposition really don't have a lot to do with your success as a leader.
Hmm.
Success as a leader comes down to having the right mindset and having the right skill set. And anyone can learn that. And if you look at engineers who, work real hard to get through university, work real hard in their careers, are really interested in doing good work and learning and growing, those are all things that translate super well to becoming really good leaders. And there are really good examples of more reserved, more introverted people becoming great leaders.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is these are people who tend more naturally to connect one-on-one with people, right? It's
Got it.
easier at times for an introvert to really sit and engage one-on-one with their staff, make their staff feel heard and appreciated and valued and understood. And that's something that at times is hard for extroverted people, right?
Right.
So yeah, and honestly, if people listening to this could walk away from the conversation with any one particular lesson learned or takeaway, it's that I really do believe that anyone has the ability to become a leader or a manager. It's really just a matter of figuring out what the skills are and then practicing.
That's great. Great advice. I mean, this is kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but have there been resources that have helped you learn this? Something that was top of mind that helped you learn these skills, or do you feel like you personally, do you feel like maybe you were gifted with uh, additional things that have helped you become a leader, or how did you go about learning some of the skills in your own life?
Yeah, gosh, it's a good question. And honestly, I did get a bit of a lucky start through sport. You know, when I was a
Ah,
kid, I played every sport. I was hockey, soccer, basketball, you name it, I played it. And that was a really good opportunity to practice leadership skills and grow as a leader. And, you know, from there, I got into things like student council and went to leadership camp
mm-hmm.
and all those things, which in high school is maybe a bit nerdy, but it certainly served me
Wow, that's
as
great.
I've grown. But I didn't stop there. And there's a really great quote from Harry Truman, who says, "Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers."
Mm.
And one of the things that I found myself blessed with is a super long commute. When when I first graduated, I'm from the east coast of Canada, where a long commute is 10 minutes. Um,
Ah,
but my wife and I moved to Ontario so that she could pursue her medical education. And in Ontario, a regular commute is an hour or more. So
ah,
all of a sudden, I had all the time in the world to listen to podcasts, audiobooks, you name it. And I really had this opportunity to dig into uh, this vast body of knowledge in leadership management. And I started listening to authors like John Maxwell and Jim Collins, and
mhm.
hearing this stuff really, it just rocked my world.
That's great.
On top of being with an employer at the time who really valued leadership development in their technical staff, and I had no idea how rare that was. I had no idea how lucky I was to kind of end up in this environment. I just thought it was normal. I thought that's what the
Yeah.
working world was like. Turns out it's not. So to have that reinforced from
Mm.
9 to 5, then have it bookended with podcast time and audiobook time, I really learned a lot for sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like most employee companies don't support management in that way, where they're getting additional training, or at least making a point where they're sending their managers to something. A lot of times it's just a company corporate get together. Maybe they're going over financials or whatever it is. But sometimes managers don't even understand those financials either. So I just think there's so much training and support that could happen to really get managers on board with being, I mean, up leveling up their skills. One of the big things, I mean, the number one reason why people leave a job right now is because their manager, like who's directly managing them. How can managers gain that self reflection that they might be the problem, and what can they do about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm sure everyone listening has heard the term the great resignation.
Oh
That's
yeah.
come up quite a bit lately. And it's true. It's true. People more often than not, when they leave a job, they're leaving their manager as opposed to leaving the role. Most
Hmm.
engineers love engineering. That's why they got into it. And when engagement is lacking, when performance is lacking, you can often trace it back to the manager, frankly. Um, so one of the things I would suggest, and I realize this comes across as a bit blunt, but if you want to know how you're doing, you have to ask. And there's a couple different ways you can approach that. You can do what's called a 360-degree review, which is an
Hmm.
anonymous request for feedback from your management, your peers, and your staff. And you can learn an awful lot from that. And there are dozens of tools out there to help facilitate that and make that whole process pretty seamless. The other thing you can do is you can hire a coach, right? There are coaches out there whose job it is not to understand what it's like to be an engineer or an engineering manager, but who are there to facilitate self-reflection, to hold you accountable, to really ask yourself and honestly answer, how are things going? Have I met my goals? Do I even have goals in the first place? And to really bring you along that path. Um, the other
Well,
thing, sorry, go for it.
oh, sorry to bug you or jump in. My other thought is like, how should these managers interpret those results? Because it feels like if I'm going to go ask for feedback, I'm probably going to get pummeled with some stuff I might not like. Might make me feel a little bad about how I'm doing. What should be the mindset, I guess, if you're going to ask for feedback? What should maybe be the mindset of that manager in receiving it?
Yeah. I think ultimately, if you can approach receiving feedback with a mindset of, I have room to grow, and I don't
Right.
care who you are, Brene Brown would tell you, I have room to grow,
Hmm.
right? World class leadership experts who've been doing this for decades at the highest level still sharpen the saw, right? They're
I love
still
it.
perfecting their craft, they're still working to get better. And if you can go into it looking for the opportunity to get better, then it doesn't sting so much. What stings often is being surprised when you hear something that you didn't know about yourself or you disagree with. Um, but that should be a sign. When something stings, when something kind of smacks you in the side of the head, and you're going, what are they talking
Or
about?
become defensive.
It's easy to become defensive. It's super
Hmm.
easy to become defensive. And let that be a sign to you. That's where you call timeout. You say, okay, why do I feel this way? Is it that I'm afraid it's true? Is it that I don't understand it? Is it what is it? Right? That's a sign you need to dig into that, lean into that.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, going back to this great recession, um, many companies are losing engineers. It's not originally, it was like the service industry, but it seems like it's affected all aspects in every area of engineering as well. What do you think companies can do to try to stem that to slow this great migration of people to different areas or quitting altogether? Are there some things, additional perks? Is it just because they want to work remote? What are your thoughts around trying to stem that for businesses?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's an important question always. You should
Yeah,
always
you
be
don't want to
thinking
lose your
about.
people.
Yeah, that's right. But now especially, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I've learned, and my colleague Anthony Fasano
Hmm.
has done some work in this as well. What's most important to people, you might be surprised. It's not actually salary. Yes, you need to pay a competitive salary, and yes, going a little bit above market. Of course, that's going to attract people for sure,
Hmm.
but that only takes you so far. What is most important to most engineers is understanding what performing well looks like, right? What are my goals as an engineer? What is it that you expect of me? And clarity around role and clarity around progression is super super important, and something that I think that a lot of companies don't do very well. um, if you are in a role and you don't understand what it means to take the next step, and you don't understand what it means to do great work, all you're faced with is this constant onslaught of more work, keep going, more work, keep going. And
Right.
people get sucked into, okay, well, maybe I need to work overtime, maybe I need to do more, maybe I need to, which just leads to burnout.
That
If
makes sense.
organizations can facilitate a person's growth, right, and see themselves as a partner along someone's career and help them grow and help them go broader or deeper or whatever it is that makes a person tick, then you'll find people are engaged. Then people will see this company is invested in my success. And then it gets to be much easier for an individual to invest in the organization's success. I think the more we look at the employer-employee relationship as a partnership, the easier it'll be to retain people.
Yeah. I've also noticed, just personally, that when management or others above you express their gratitude and are thankful for the work that you have done, instead of just slapping another project on your desk, maybe a little bit of recognition, doesn't need to be much, but just to let people know that you're valued and we care about what you're doing. That goes a long ways, I feel like,
Big
in
time. Big time.
letting people know, like, hey, we appreciate what you're doing for us, and here's a pat on the back for stuff. So
Yeah, I in my last role, one of the things that I did, we had monthly all hands meetings that I held for my team, and at every meeting, I led the meeting with a series of kudos. Who had work anniversaries, who had birthdays, who did a great job on a particular project, who went above and beyond for a colleague. It took me 15 minutes to
right.
scan my emails and remind myself, right, this so and so did this. It was, this person's 30th anniversary at the company. That's a big deal. And then to make a slide, right? It doesn't take any effort, frankly, but to recognize people first of all, and then recognize them in front of their peers, it can go a very long way. I got phenomenal feedback from that.
I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing how a small effort can go a very, very long way.
That's great. You've shared a ton of advice with people. I'm curious, if you went back to a graduate engineer just starting their career, would there be some pieces of advice you would give them as they're trying to fill their way through a company, figuring out what they like, dislike? Do I want to be a manager? Do I want to be a principal engineer? What advice or tips would you give for a guy just starting out in this industry or being an engineer?
Yeah, I would say don't rush. Allow yourself to be the graduate engineer that you are. Because if you are too quick to push into leadership and management, and let me tell you, if you do push and you do bring your A game and you are, even part ways intelligent, that will get recognized, and you will find yourself into leadership and management and even team lead roles relatively early. And that's great and everything, but the problem is once you start down that path, it's hard to double back. And if you don't have a really, really strong technical footing, it will be very difficult, A, to go back, B, to be a good leader and a good manager.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to be the smartest person in the room. I don't think you need to be the best engineer in the room to be a great manager. But I do think you need to be good. You need to be at least highly competent technically. And early in your career is the time to double down on that and really invest in your technical knowledge. And yeah, I see a lot of people who come to me because they want to get into leadership or project management or people management. And that's great. And you can start that journey, but don't rush it.
And they've been in their career for a year.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I appreciate that ambition. I do. But
and I think they'll get recognized for it too. And like you said, I think they will get plugged into a spot. I've always appreciated a manager that I could go to and ask questions to that would have some good feedback. And I think, like you're saying, if they don't have the experience or the footing, the technical knowledge, it's hard to want to approach your manager when you might not get an answer at all, or maybe they might send you somewhere else. I don't know, which might be fine. But in my mind, like, I want my manager to be someone I could maybe ping some things off of and ask questions and get answers.
A manager's job is not necessarily to have the answers to all questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. It's okay as a manager not to know, even for a technical question. But what you do have to be able to do is chart a path toward getting an answer, whether that's through someone else or you doing a little bit of homework. You need at least that framework, that context to understand the question and why it's an important question, or whether or not it's the right question to be answering is probably the more important skill. Yeah, you do need a certain baseline, and early in your career is the time to develop that.
Great. With your website and everything you've been moving forward on leadership and coaching, has there been any common themes that you have seen as you've started this journey? Any particular maybe top three topics that you seem to hammer on a lot? I mean, is that are there some themes around what you've been doing?
Yeah, so it's a really, really good question. And I think one of the themes that comes to mind right away is people feel a lack of control in terms of the pace of work, the number of things that are being thrown at them, the number of projects they're on, the number of teams they support. There's this common sense that it's hard to balance it all, if not impossible, let alone being a good spouse or parent or friend or whatever.
Hmm.
That's one major problem I think throughout our profession is just that people feel overwhelmed and feel burnt out, particularly in the ranks of management. One of the other themes that comes up is this difficulty with letting go, especially in that transition into leadership and management roles, because like we talked about, often it's really bright engineers, really bright technical minds that move into management. So
Yes.
doing the engineering is all you've ever known. So it's very
Yep.
difficult to let go and let now the junior engineer that we were just saying needs to develop those technical skills. It's very hard to let work go and let them do it because they're going to mess it up, because they're going to
Right.
take forever, because they don't know what's going on, and they're going to ask me 1,000 questions. So I'm just going to do it. And it's this self perpetuating cycle, these two problems, right? The first one where the manager is overwhelmed, the second one where I don't want to let anyone else do the work. it, Leaders do it to themselves without realizing it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen that in my own industry. I I work in the transmission engineering industry, which is the utility world, and I have seen where engineers rise up to be managers, directors, and they are still so heavily involved in the design aspects that they don't become managers anymore. They're still the go-to source for the final say on the engineering,
Hmm.
which might be okay, but I feel like when you get to a management level, there's some things that probably, like you said, should let go, let the engineers run with decisions that may or may not be great decisions, and maybe you can step in as a manager and say, "Why don't you think about doing it this way?" But to make all the decisions might, I can see, definitely burn you out quickly if you're managing people plus managing projects. That probably doesn't get you very far in the long run without burning out.
Yeah, big
So,
time, big time. But at the same time, it's hard to blame new
oh
managers
yeah.
and leaders because they've probably not learned how to delegate or when to delegate. They've probably not learned that it's okay to let little bad things happen
Hmm.
for the sake of someone's development, and to put checks and balances in place to catch those little bad things. Again, it comes
Those
back
are
to
skills you got to learn.
absolutely,
That's why Pat's
absolutely.
doing this.
It's exactly why I'm doing this, because people aren't taught, and they're not provided feedback, and you're left to the school of hard knocks.
I like
That's,
it.
and that's pretty miserable for a pretty long time.
Well, Pat, I have another question for you. How has this is just kind of a fun question, but how has engineering helped you appreciate what you have in your life?
Yeah, it's a good one. Engineering's helped me appreciate just how complex and interconnected the world is. And I had this moment here the other day where my wife needed an orange. Okay, so I live in the east coast of Canada. Oranges do not grow in Nova Scotia, and it was a blizzard. So I trudged my way to the grocery store, picked up an orange for under $1, and it occurred to me, kind of leaving the grocery store, how phenomenal it is that we live in a time where, in the middle of winter in Nova Scotia, I can produce an orange almost magically for under $1. And
Yeah.
and to know that the systems, the logistics, the technology that's in place to facilitate that, it is just incredible. To even have an inkling into how complex that all is, down to when I was able to pay for the orange with my watch Right?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling how, for all the things that we see as engineers, that are problems, things that don't work, things that you're struggling to get going, the systems that do work and are interconnected is just mind-boggling to me, and it really does help me appreciate the world we live in.
I totally agree with you. I also think about, everything so, it seems so sensitive. And when you know how, as an engineer, how things all work, you almost wonder like, man, how are we still keeping things running when you know,
How do we pull this off?
yes,
It's amazing.
how do we pull this off when it could go so bad so quick? But yeah, I mean, I definitely have appreciated everything. Uh, Engineering has opened up my eyes to the world around me and how things work and how far we have come, even as a society,
Hmm.
and developing things, and the complexity of it all is just really neat and fascinating. So, good thoughts on that. Pat, this has been fun. I appreciate you doing this. I'm wondering, could you give us a reminder of your website and if there's any other tools or resources you'd recommend to our audience?
Yeah, you bet. The website is engineeringandleadership.com. And you can learn all about my work. I write articles. I've got a podcast, quite a bit of free material on there. And then if you're looking to go deeper with coaching, consulting, training, anything like that, you can learn all that on the website. But I do have a bit of a freebie for the folks who are listening. I've got a book that I wrote a while back, an ebook called Engineering Leadership 101. And it's for engineers doesn't matter where you are in your career, whether you're in the early stages or you're already a leader. It doesn't really matter what industry you're in. That the idea is that it provides kind of concrete, pragmatic, practical tools that you can use to improve yourself as a leader. And people can download that at engineeringandleadership.com/leadership101.
Oh, I love it. Well, this has been really fun. What is there a best way to connect with you, Pat?
Yeah,
If people have questions or want to follow up?
absolutely. Yeah, there's a contact page for the website, but I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me at LinkedIn/in/Patrick Sweet.
I love it.
Also on Twitter and Facebook as well.
Okay, well, this has been a really engaging conversation. I really appreciate your thoughts on leadership, on management, helping other engineers get to where they want to go if they want to go to leadership paths. So appreciate you jumping on and doing this with me, Pat.
Thanks so much. This is a lot of fun.
All right, see ya.
Bye.